Okay, so today's class is actually a bonus class for the participants of my Tuesday morning Tanya class, and we decided to open it up to many people. And it is dedicated to the refuah shlema of a little boy who really needs a refuah shlema, the refuah shlema to Rafael Chaim Meir ben Sima Chasha. Okay, so this class, as I explained in various text notes that I sent together with the propaganda for this class, it is not a class about the details. It's a class about why. It's also a half an hour class, so it's limited to that time. And we can always, further on down the line have even a more detailed class, but my intention is that everybody should walk away from this class with a unique, different perspective, one that you may never have heard of before, and that will inspire you to then fulfill this mitzvah, this very special mitzvah of tznius, in a more special and enjoyable way. Right? It's actually like a little bit beyond my comfort zone to talk about tznius, because I feel like sometimes people have a negative connotation. There's so many don'ts. But when you look into the Hasidic sources, you do see that it's actually one of the most beautiful, empowering mitzvahs that a woman can actually take upon herself. Now, I'm going to start, as I said, I am including the meaning of hair covering for a married woman in this class, and I'm actually going to start off with that. It's also a very unique perspective. And then, because hair covering for a married woman is included in the boundaries, in the laws of tzniut, in the laws of modesty, so I will start off with a meaning, the esoteric, more deeper meaning of hair covering, and then we will go into the general perspective of tznius, which hair covering is included in that as well. But just that hair covering has an added plus. I'm just going to mute all participants, something which I did not do. Sorry. Okay. So now when we speak about halacha and when we speak about our obligations, specifically when a person gets married, chassan and kala is standing under the chuppah, we have to remember that what's happening in this world is actually much larger than ourselves. It is not only what we see that is what is happening. Chazal tell us that Torah medaberes ba'alyonim u'merabmezes b'tachtonim. The real truth is in the spiritual spheres. The real truth is what Hashem sees, which is completely his divine light, and nothing is hidden from him. What happens here in this world is really a hint of what goes on in the spiritual spheres, a reflection also of what goes on for spiritual spheres, and they really work hand in hand. One affects the other. Now, when we speak about hair covering, we're going to speak about a few different concepts, then we're going to bring them together. So first, let's speak about when Hashem wanted to create the world. When Hashem wanted to create the world, he had to conceal his light somewhat and in some way, because we would have been unable to tolerate the light of Hashem. So therefore, Hashem channeled his light through a process called Tzimtzum Ha'or, his great shining light, which we would not be able to tolerate. He filtered his light through a process which hid even more this light from us in order to create the world. So how did this work practically? We know that there is an order of creation, which is actually called in Hasidic teaching Seder Hishtalshelus, the order of creations, which this order of creation actually symbolizes the filters or the levels through which Hashem channeled his light. So we do know that there are 10 attributes of God through which Hashem, the spheres, I'm sure you've all heard of those, through which Hashem channeled, contracted, filtered his light. And without explaining how each level works, we're not going to go into those details. It is enough for us to know that all these attributes, all the contracting of the light of Hashem, was not sufficient to create the world until the very last one, which is the sphere of Malchus, the sphere of royalty. So there are 10 spheres. Hashem contracts his light, filters them, 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 10 of them. But still, the world is a potential world, is not complete until the very, very, very last one. The world did not exist until the last sphere of Malchus. So until Malchus, the world was a potential world. And with the sphere of Malchus, it became a reality. Now, Tzimtzum, this filtering or contracting or hiding of Hashem's light, it can sometimes seem a little bit negative, like Hashem's hiding from us in a way. It limits the light of Hashem. So on the one hand, we can say it's negative. On the other hand, we could say that it's actually something extremely positive. It makes Kedusha, holiness, practical and accessible to us. It enabled the world to be created. It's like, those concentrated fruit juices that, I don't know what the process is, but they boil and boil and boil and boil until it's all there. All the fruit juice is not missing. That's why it's extremely, extremely sweet. You have to mix it with water. It's all there. It's just very, very contracted in a very, very small place. But what's the purpose? What was the purpose? The purpose was to create the world. Hashem did us a favor. He created the world. And what is the purpose of the creation of the world? To elevate the world to a level of revealed holiness, again, through giving us free choice, etc. So just to summarize up till now, for those who have just joined, Hashem wanted to create the world. His light was too big. So he had to channel the world, not only through the 10 spheres, but firstly through the 4 spiritual worlds which come before. It's not important for you to know every single name of every single world or sphere. The spheres are divided into 2 groups. The 3 intellectual attributes, which are Chachma, Bina, and Das. And this last 7 are the emotional attributes. And for the purpose of this discussion, we are actually going to speak about the last 7 attributes. Why? Because each of the 7 attributes contribute to a day of the week. So, for example, during the 6 days of creation, Hashem was actually contracting his light according to these 7 attributes. So, for example, on Sunday it was Chesed, on Monday it was Gvura, on Tuesday it was Tiferes, etc. Through the process of Tzimtzum, each day a different sphera, but the world was not completed. The last sphera, the sphera of Malchus, which corresponds to Shabbos, the day of Shabbos, the world came into complete existence. Now, what do we say on Shabbos? We daven Friday night, we say, L'cha doidi likras kala panei Shabbos nakam kabbalah. Let us go out and greet the bride. Let us go out and greet Shabbos. Shabbos is feminine. Shabbos is a queen. Shabbos is a bride. We call Shabbos Hamalka, Shabbos the queen. So during the first 6 days of creation, Hashem created and changed various elements of his universe, which resulted in the world as we know it. Hashem didn't rest on Shabbos because he was tired, but because the world was in a state of harmony. Nothing more had to be worked on, nothing more had to be changed. And actually, during the 6 work days, we ourselves, we operate also in this masculine mode of activity and conquest. We try to dominate our surroundings, much the same as Hashem did when he was creating the world. And on Shabbos, we enter a feminine mode. It's not really feminine and masculine. These are modes of being. These are ways of being. We enter a feminine mode of peace and harmony. And therefore, Shabbos is referred to as the feminine. Shabbos Hamalka, Shabbos the queen, L'cha doidi likras kala, let us go and greet the bride. And just as the process of creation enabled the Kedusha of Hashem to not only remain in the potential, the holiness of Hashem didn't only remain in the potential, it became a practical, accessible holiness, often concealed. Yes, it's concealed. It became a world. So too, Shabbos is also a day of more tangible Kedusha. We are able to feel Kedusha much more easily on Shabbos, and that's why actually we are prohibited from doing certain mundane activities on Shabbos, because they don't match with the Kedusha of the day, right? So the Kedusha of Shabbos, the holiness of Shabbos is just more practical and accessible, much more than the rest of the week. Now, this is how Hashem created the world. What about when Hashem created people? Hashem followed the same system as well. He said to the malachim, he said to the angels, Naaseh Adam b'tzalmeinu kidmuseinu. Let us create man in our image. Why in our image, not in my image, Hashem asked? Because Hashem said, let us create man in the same image that I am and that you are and all the other creations, using the system of the same system of creation, the 10 godly attributes, the Seder Hishtalshalus. A person is actually called an olam katan, a small world. And therefore, in the same way that Hashem created the world with these 10 attributes, Hashem also created the people in this way. So we are actually taught in Tanya how before a neshama, before a soul comes down into this world, the neshama has to go through a similar system, which Tanya actually calls a gestation, very similar to a pregnancy, if you can call it that, where it has to first pass through, be filtered through the 4 spiritual worlds, and then the 10 attributes, directly from the great light of Hashem, and then this great neshama manifests itself into the body of either a woman or a man. Now, actually, it's interesting is, I usually give this class to brides, but a bride and groom, when they're under the chuppah, a groom is considered a king and a bride a queen. And the principle is in Kabbalah that you don't have a king without a queen. A king is not considered a king unless he has a partner, unless he has a queen. The Aramaic words that are brought down in a mimer are malka beloy matrunisa, lav hiu melech, v'lav hiu gadol. A melech without a king without a queen is not considered a king, not even considered anything. He's a potential king. So the goal is to unite the king and the queen. The goal is to unite the feminine and masculine. And when a bride and a groom are under the chuppah, they are going to begin a mini world. The chassan, the masculine part of this equation, only has the potential to create this mini world, right? So we're actually a reflection of Hashem, starting our own mini worlds. The chassan only gives his seed. He has the potential, but the woman, the feminine, the queen, actually is the practical sphere, much like with the sphere of Malchus, the world came into existence. The woman is actually what puts the potential of creating this mini world, having children, into an actual practical way. So now let's stop for a moment. I hope everyone's following along. Let's stop for a moment and examine the fact that for every positive, Hashem created a negative. Zel umazeh bara Elokim, and this is actually to give us free choice to make the right choices and to overcome the negative. Before Adam and Chava sinned in Gan Eden, and we're going to come back to Adam and Chava in a few minutes as well, because that is the crux of why we have to keep the laws of modesty. Positive and negative, good and bad, was very clear. It was very clearly delineated. In fact, because it was so clearly delineated, they were not clothed. They did not have clothes because they did not feel any shame. It was not confusing. They were fulfilling Hashem's will in Gan Eden. After they sinned, however, the lines became blurred. It became different. What had previously existed as a protective shell around the world, protecting the holy world from negative forces outside the world, after the sin of the Eitz Hadas, after Adam and Chava sinned, this klipa, this shell, which was originally meant to protect from negative forces, broke into the world, and there are shards of this shell until today within the world, concealing God's light all over the world, right? And whereas before the sin, this klipa knew its place, knew that it was there to protect the world from negative forces, now we enter, after the sin of Eitz Hadas, we have entered into a stage which is called a mixture of good and bad, which is why nowadays in the world it's not always clear what's good, what's bad, what's holy, and what's unholy. But what is the nature of klipa, these negative forces? Firstly, klipa conceals godliness. But although it conceals godliness, at the same time, it cannot exist without God. It cannot have any life or vitality without Hashem. Ein oid milvado. Hashem created everything. And Hashem gave Klippa. Klippa exists for us to have free choice, but Hashem gave it a very, very, very limited life force. And therefore, it's always looking for more life. It's always looking for more vitality. It's always searching for more vitality. So where does it take its vitality from? Where does it get its life from? Where does it get its life from? Wherever it's easiest to take from. Klippa is lazy. It wants easy, accessible Kedusha to nourish itself. If it's not nourished from the light of Hashem, it dies, which is why when a Jew sins, he's nourishing Klippa. Klippa looks for the easiest way to get its nourishment. So therefore, if Klippa has a choice between a Jew and a non-Jew, both are creations of God, but the holiness of a Jew is more accessible, it will go directly to a Jew. Which is why, by the way, a Jew is obligated to wash his hands in the morning, Negelwasser, whereas a guy does not have this obligation. A non-Jew does not have this obligation because Klippa is attracted to a Jew, where it's easiest to get his Kedusha. Now, remember the creation of the world. Let's go back to the creation of the world. Why does the world seem so full of negative forces, or Klippa, as we call it, right? Because when Hashem created the world, he contracted his light, he hid his light in order to create the world, in order to make Kedusha more practical and accessible. But the opposite seems to be true, right? So it became, if the Kedusha of the world became more accessible, and Hashem was able to create the world, that means that the light of Hashem for Klippa is more accessible and easier to access. Now, what would have happened, the question is asked in Hasidus, what would have happened if Hashem would have gone one level beyond Malchus? In other words, up till Malchus, Hashem was contracting his light, but what if Hashem would have contracted his light even further? We live in such a dark, apparently, world with lots of obstacles and challenges and the light of Hashem being concealed. If Hashem would have concealed his light even further, it would have been a world of chaos, a very undesirable level, something which is called in mystical terms, we would have been nourishing this klippa to a very, very large extent, and it would not have been desirable. There would have been complete chaos and darkness. So now, and as I said before, we're going to be learning lots of different concepts and putting them together. Let's examine hair. Hair is an example in this world. Hair is actually a form of tzimtzum. It's a form of contracting the light of Hashem. Why do we say that? Why do we say that? Because the life and vitality of hair is very limited. Yes, on the one hand, hair grows, so it's a living entity, correct? But on the other hand, it's very limited because when you cut hair, it doesn't hurt, which is different to the rest of your body. If you cut something else in your body, it definitely will hurt, whereas hair has life, but a limited life, and therefore it doesn't hurt, right? So now let's go back and tie everything together. When a chassan and a kala, when a bride and a groom stand under the chuppah, it is one of the occasions where Hashem sends a new light into this world. There are two occasions when Hashem sends a new light into this world: marriage under the chuppah, and when a baby is born. Two very, very special, holy, auspicious occasions, right? And as such, Klippa is very, very attracted to this because it's a new source of sustenance. Oh, wow, there's a new light. Let's go get some Kedusha to nourish ourselves, right? And Klippa is attracted to what kind of a Kedusha? A very practical, easy. Klippa wants easy. So Klippa is attracted more to the woman than to the man. Klippa has a choice. Should I access myself? Should I access the Kedusha of the man? Or should I access the Kedusha of the woman? Now, of course, Klippa sometimes accesses the Kedusha of the man. But if Klippa had a choice between a man and a woman's Kedusha is much easier accessed, through her hair, which also is tzimtzum. And if Klippa accesses her hair through something else which is tzimtzum, so we have a situation which is very undesirable, very similar to what would have happened had Hashem contracted his light even one more level. And therefore, a woman covers her hair to protect herself from those negative forces accessing her holiness. Okay, that's hair covering. Okay, now let's go back and speak about Adam and Chava in Gan Eden. Adam and Chava in Gan Eden, before they sinned, were living a perfect existence. They were totally fulfilling the will of Hashem. They had no reason to be ashamed or embarrassed because their innermost faculties were in complete harmony with the will of God. Therefore, they had no reason for clothing. They had no need for clothing. They were not embarrassed. And the light of Hashem permeated their very beings. Now, this sounds like a very high level, that before the sin, Hashem permeated them. They were at one with the will of God. They were in harmony with the will of God. It sounds very elevated. And usually when we learn about this, we say, oops, they sinned, and unfortunately, they descended to a lower level, right? After the sin, something very interesting happened. After the sin, they started having a sense of self. Hashem's light was concealed, so they started feeling their own egos. They started feeling that they are independent existences, and they started feeling shame. And because of that, they had to clothe themselves. But a very interesting thing, although these clothes were necessary because of their lowered level of conscious faculties, right? They were now flawed human beings, right? These clothes they were like a tikkun. They enabled Adam and Chava to reach a level of godliness which not only permeated them, but encompasses and transcends them. Because clothing is different to food. Food you ingest, it goes inside of you. Clothing is something which surrounds you. Now, the light of Hashem, which permeates us, yes, it's in us, but it's limited by our own consciousness and abilities and limitations. The light of Hashem, which transcends and encompasses, just like clothing encompasses a person, is unlimited and stems from a much higher source. Now, they were able, therefore, to attain a level through clothing themselves. They were able to attain a level higher than they had previously as a result of surrounding themselves with Hashem's light as a tikkun. Now, there are different types of clothing. Some clothing is protective, right? You wear a raincoat to protect from the rain. You wear a coat to protect from the cold. Some clothing is for honor or status. Different uniforms signify what job a person has: a pilot, a policeman, a fireman, right? Royalty wears certain kinds of clothing to exhibit their status. And then there is something called Bigdei Kodesh, holy garments, which were worn by the Kohanim in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple. Now, interestingly enough, the Kohen, the priests in the Beis HaMikdash, they had to wear these special clothing in order to do their avodah, their service in the Beis HaMikdash. If a Kohen was missing one of his garments while he was doing his avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, he was not only not able to transmit Kedusha to the nation of Israel, which was the Kohen's job, right? But he was also chayav misa. It says he was actually liable for death. That's why it had to be very, very detail oriented, his clothing. We are a nation of Kohanim. Now, although both men and women are obligated in the laws of modesty, many people don't know that. Men are also obligated in the laws of modesty, wearing the proper and required clothing for our Avodas Hashem. Women have a greater responsibility and merit, and the Rebbe says this in a Sikha, because we are beautiful. We are more beautiful than men, and we have the power to access this amazing Kedusha for ourselves and our families, a Kedusha that was only found in the Beis HaMikdash. Now, I'm sure everybody remembers Kimchis, right? So we're going back a little bit to the hair covering. Kimchis was the lady who never uncovered her hair. And everybody kind of like sometimes doesn't want to hear about her because, oh, okay, we're not on that level, right? She was very meticulous with covering her, with all the laws of modesty and especially covering her hair. And therefore, she merited that all her sons were high priests, Kohanim Gedolim. Now, here's the thing. When we hear the story, we kind of hear the story and many people just kind of like gloss right over because no one wants to hear about it, right? We can't achieve that level. But here's the thing. It wasn't so easy for Kimchis all the time. She wasn't always so comfortable. She was hot and schwitzy, and yet she did it for her children, right? So that her children would have the kedusha of a Kohen Gadol. She wanted her children to be connected to Hashem. And that's the point over here. She wanted them to have the intimate connection with Hashem like a Kohen Gadol, because the Kohen Gadol was someone who had the most intimate connection with Hashem, entering the Holy of Holies in the Beis Hamikdash on the holiest of days, Yom Kippur, right? And she achieved her goal by doing something that was difficult, by going out of her comfort zone, right? And her children were therefore able to intimately connect with Hashem. That was her reward. Now, why is tznius symbolic and hair covering, which is included for a married woman? Why is that? Why are the laws of modesty symbolic of our relationship with Hashem? Right? The relationship that we have with Hashem is the most important relationship we can have. More important than with our spouses and children and families. It's a very important relationship. We want to have an intimate connection with Hashem. We want Hashem to be intimately connected to our lives. So why are the laws of modesty representative of our connection with Hashem? Because the mitzvah of tznius in the Torah is actually, the words referring to the laws of modesty is Hatznei leches im Hashem Elokecha. Walk in a modest fashion with Hashem your God. Now, it's very surprising because I've heard from a lot of people when we have this discussion that the laws of tznius, modesty, are seemingly only outside of the home or outside of your bedroom. They don't apply at all times. But here we see differently. That the laws of tznius apply at all times, not only in public. You should walk hatznei leches im Hashem Elokecha. You should walk modestly with Hashem your God, because Hashem is always with you, surrounding you, protecting you, helping you, and that is how we access this encompassing light of Hashem, which for a married woman as well includes the laws of hair covering. So with that, I will conclude. There's much more to say on the topic. I can stop the recording. So if anyone has questions,